Thank you so much to the Board of Trustees, President Ann Harris, Dean Elaine Mosleff, distinguished members of the administration, faculty, staff, honorees, family and friends of the class of 2022, and to the outstanding 2022 graduating class of Grinnell College. Allow me to congratulate you on this significant milestone in your life. You have not only successfully completed your academic studies, but you persisted amidst a pandemic that presented a lot of uncertainties, which is a testament to your fortitude and faithfulness. And so again, I say congratulations. 55 years ago, this coming October, my father, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., visited Grinnell College to preach at a Sunday convocation on the subject of remaining awake through a revolution, at a time when our nation was engaged in the Vietnam War and having himself officially spoken against it months prior. It is certainly an honor for me to go anywhere his footsteps go as his daughter, as especially since I have been privileged to carry forward his legacy of nonviolent social change to a new generation that, like his generation, is grappling with a world still challenged by what he called the triple evils of poverty or excessive materialism, racism, and militarism. I am extremely honored to be your commencement speaker and the recipient of the Honorary Doctor of Law degree, having matriculated some 40 years ago this academic year at Grinnell College as a shy, intimidated, and very homesick 18-year-old who only lasted one semester and found myself right back home in Atlanta to finish my academic matriculation at what is now the #1 HBCU, Spelman College. And although I did not get the official BA degree in 1985 from Grinnell, with the honorary degree bestowed upon me today, I can now proudly say I'm an official Grinnellian and claim you as my class of 2022. Now, the person who stands before you today, who is an accomplished and well-versed individual, is totally different than that shy and timid young lady that matriculated at Grinnell her freshman year. Like many of you, I looked forward to attending college away from home. I took a great leap of faith at the invitation of Ambassador Andrew Young, who spoke at Grinnell and was asked by some of the black students then to help them recruit other black students to this school. He brought the message back to me, and I was eager to be among those who accepted the call, ignoring the sage advice of my mom, who asked me with her mother wit, "Do you want to go visit Grinnell before you make up your mind?" To her query, I said, "No, I trust Uncle Andy." Well, Mom knew what I didn't know. Little did I know that in my naivety, I was totally unprepared culturally and socially for the change. Although Grinnell was and still is a stellar academic institution with unprecedented credentials, it took me too far out of my comfort zone, and I didn't have the intestinal fortitude at the time to endure the 4 years outside of a place of familiarity and comfort. Coming from the South, that's why you see the heating pad there, with warm weather, a majority black city of approximately 400,000, and surrounded by family, community, and church life, I was just a fish out of water and needed to get back home to reoxygenate myself and not lose my bearings. Unknown to me at the time of my enrollment, Grinnell had an exchange program with Spelman College because the president of Spelman was an alumnus of Grinnell. As a result, I was able to complete my first semester freshman year here and have all my credits transferred to Spelman so I wouldn't lose any ground. Subsequently, I graduated from Spelman College in 1985 with a BA degree in psychology, and just 6 weeks ago received an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from them. I share this part of my story because although I was not prepared to be out of my comfort zone when I matriculated here, since that time, and upon completing my undergraduate and postgraduate academic studies, receiving both a Master of Divinity and Doctor of Law degree from Emory University, I have traveled to just about every state, speaking at numerous arenas for all types of organizations, corporations, colleges, universities, faith communities, at the White House, in several countries around the world. Met with ambassadors, vice presidents, presidents, and even met one-on-one with our current Pope, Pope Francis. I've been exposed to numerous cultures and people who don't speak my language, eat my foods, experience my type of faith, and don't necessarily agree with my political, economic, or social views. As a result of these travels and experiences, my view of the world and my understanding of people and circumstances that are different than mine has been expanded. What I discovered is something that I believe is essential to the survival of our world, is that we must have people who are committed, and leaders especially, to coming out of their comfort zones and experiencing something different than what they're accustomed to, used to, and comfortable with. The more I exposed myself to people, places, and cultures that were different than what I knew and was familiar with, it opened me up to see the world from a more expansive view and think about ways to solve the world's problems that would lead to what I call win-win outcomes. In this vein, now I consider myself as a solutionist. A solutionist, to me, is a person who understands the interrelatedness of all lives and approaches the challenges and problems of this world by committing to create compassionate outcomes that are sensitive to different perspectives and all people who will be impacted. They realize the truth of my father's words, that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And what affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I cannot be all that I ought be until you are all that you ought be, and you cannot be all that you ought be until I am all that I ought be. Graduates, as you leave the confines of this great wellspring of academic rigor and innovative pedagogy, you are now tasked with translating your experience here at Grinnell into a mission to bring lasting solutions to a world where social justice continues to evade so many people, especially in Black and economically challenged communities, and social injustice is pervasive throughout various sectors of American life. Therefore, whatever your career or professional trajectory you take, I challenge you to be the solutionist that this nation and world needs. I believe, and I think some of us would agree, that we are living in the most polarizing time of our world, with increasing tension, where it is popular to be extreme in one's views without any consideration or understanding of the other. In fact, too many people seek to solve problems that only fit their personal party or group interests or perspective. In our nation's capital and many state capitals, the left seeks solutions that only fit the left's agenda, and the right only seeks solution that fits the right's agenda. And each behaves as if they have a monopoly on truth and what is right. Our world, though, cannot long survive these extremes without eventually imploding unless there are those who are committed to working on lasting solutions that pull together the threads of truth from the extremes and synthesize them into a higher truth. My father's words are instructive here. He said that life at its best is the creative synthesis of opposites in fruitful harmony. To the graduating class, be the solutionist who synthesizes the opposites for the sake of humanity, a humanity that continues to be separated and divided and torn apart in the face of injustice, inequity, supply chain shortages, Supreme Court decisions, partisan politics, isms, phobias, oppression, exploitation, greed, selfishness, rugged individualism, climate change, fear based off false narratives that create dangerous ideologies that can lead to deadly outcomes like Buffalo, extreme materialism that have created enormous wealth gaps, war and materialism, unprecedented violence, and systems of white supremacy that cause persistent racialized outcomes. Being a solutionist who synthesizes the opposites requires balance, though, so that you do not acquiesce to injustice or accept what my father called a false peace, which merely seeks to address the tension, often at the expense of establishing justice. But you discover ways to defeat injustice without becoming unjust and diminishing people. Most of us are familiar with the statement made by Mahatma Gandhi that says, "Be the change you want to see in the world." For one who is a solutionist, that means having a vision of the world we wish to see so that we can work toward it. In my faith tradition, the Bible says that without a vision, the people perish. Or in another version, it says they cast off restraint. In other words, in the absence of a vision, there's nothing to guide you and keep you focused so that your thoughts, feelings, and emotions don't take front and center and control. Therefore, it is essential for a solutionist to have a vision so that you do not succumb to the noise and temperature of the world and become a reactionary instead of the solutionist that the world desperately needs right now. I encourage each one of you graduating today to capture a vision that reflects a world that is just, humane, equitable, and peaceful. My vision is a world that is the beloved community, where injustice ceases and love prevails. What drives a solutionist, then, is their love for humanity and a respect and value for the dignity and worth of all people, even those who are causing the harm or injustice. Because the focus is on defeating the injustice and not those who cause the injustice or harm, because the ultimate vision or goal is to work toward a compassionate win-win solution that uplifts the dignity of all. Instead of calling a person out, the solutionist calls a person in, and they call a person up to a higher plane. That's why a solutionist never exchanges harm for harm or insult for insult. They understand what my father said when he said, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And so, go forth and be love and be light in the world, where there's the darkness of injustice and hate that is fueled by racism and a white supremacist ideology. Therefore, our vision should also encompass condemning and eradicating racism in our world. But not only is having a vision essential to being a solutionist, but equally important is being a critical thinker. Albert Einstein once said that the problems of the world cannot be solved on the same level of thinking or at the same level of awareness and consciousness that created them. The problems of our world today will not be diminished with more of the same thinking and behavior. As a solutionist, you seek to bring higher level thinking, which relies upon critical thinking, going beyond the surface, being curious to explore more deeply a problem from various sides and perspectives. A critical thinking solutionist will ask more questions to gain greater understanding, like, what is the origin of this? How did we get to this place? Why do people feel or think this certain way? Our world needs more people who will not just accept things at face value, but will commit to examining, questioning, and dissecting what is presented to discover that higher truth. A solutionist understands that everything is not merely just black and white or right or wrong, nor left or right, but there are nuances and complexities that have to be taken into consideration to reach the higher truth that leads to an outcome that is best for the greatest good of humanity. In other words, a solutionist leaves no stone unturned or perspective by the wayside. Solutionists ultimately conclude that people cannot be disposed of, canceled, or replaced, but ideologies, prejudices, biases, injustices, inequities must be dismantled and replaced with love-centered thinking, engaging, speaking, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, societal transformation. This is the nonviolent way that I encourage you to embrace as a solutionist in our world. Lastly, I recall the profound words of Socrates that reminds us that the unexamined life is not worth living. Nothing has been more damaging or dangerous to our world than people, and especially those in leadership who are leading corporations, organizations, colleges, universities, representing groups of people, raising families, teaching and training others, advancing causes or advocating on behalf of others, who have failed to engage in a self-audit to determine if there are ways of thinking, speaking, and engaging or not speaking or engaging that is contributing to the problems of the world or perpetuating an unjust status quo. Self-examination is an important virtue for one who is a solutionist. It empowers you to become self-aware. Research reveals that those who are self-aware have a greater ability to regulate emotions, are freed from their assumptions and biases, can understand things from multiple perspectives, and become better decision makers. Self-awareness gives one the capacity to clarify their values, their thoughts, their feelings, behaviors, strengths and weaknesses, and seek to adjust and work on whatever is needed to be a congruent person. Therefore, being a self-aware solutionist, you are more likely to be the kind of person who empowers, who includes, and recognizes the value of others. Self-awareness also keeps this power dynamic in our world in check, because without it, your ability to empathize with others is lessened, and you're less able to consider the needs and perspective of others, and so you blindly believe that your way is superior, and everyone else needs to change, and not you. So I encourage you to always live and lead the examined life to help our world become whole. And I leave you with this story. It's about a father that was engrossed in his work while his little daughter constantly distracted him in an attempt for him to make him play with her. To buy some time and keep her busy, the father tore a page of a printed map of the world from a magazine into pieces and asked her to go to her room and put the pieces back together to make the world whole again. The daughter was very young, probably about 9 years of age, and he was pretty sure that it would take her hours to get it done. But he was surprised when he saw his little girl coming out of the room with a smile and the pieces of the world put back together into a whole map within just a few minutes. Stunned, he asked his daughter, how did she solve that puzzle so quickly? The young girl replied, "Daddy, there was a woman's face on the other side of the paper. And when I focused on putting the pieces of her face together, the whole world was put back together into a whole piece." Class of 2022, you begin your journey today to step fully into the world. Keep in mind there is always the other side or other sides to the problems of our world. Be the solutionist who has a vision, is committed to self-awareness, and employs critical thinking to synthesize the different perspectives that lead to win-win outcomes that respect and value the dignity of all humanity. And in closing, I remind you once again, and hope you remember this for the rest of your life, of what my father said. Life, at its best, is the creative synthesis of opposites in fruitful harmony. As you leave Grinnell, go and live your best life and join me on the journey in creating the beloved community. God bless you.